Hello everyone on the internet, and thanks for tuning in.
And welcome to another episode with me, Master Bushido, and my Toku Bros on the outside of Flayvaman!
Standing Pie.
For those that don't know, that is the unfortunate rendition of Flayvaman's version of what we're going to be talking about is Kamen Rider Faiz! And that,
Yay!
and that unfortunate rendition was from the Henshin belt, just preparing to Henshin, which was atrocious, to be honest. I would have honestly
So,
I would have preferred if he actually said exceed charge.
Exceed discharge. Anyway, so what do we remember about the build up to Fires, or what did we know about Fires prior to watching? Bearing in mind, I watched Fires about 4 years ago, roughly, and you've only just finished watching it.
Yeah.
So
right.
How much did you know about Fires before you watched the first ep?
Generically, like, I only knew Faiz through bits of, like, say, from Decade, from other Heisei Rider series and so on and so forth. That's about it, really. I mean, for Decade kind of gave me an outline as to what it's about and so on and so forth, and it kind of did have a bit of a spoiler.
One massive question for you, though, because you've seen Ryuki, you've seen like all the other riders. How come you hadn't specifically seen Fires until I kept bugging you to watch it? How come that was the one that you missed?
I don't know.
So you didn't know anything about it, so it's not like you had an excuse to miss it.
Yeah. Although I don't know why I endured Ryuki.
What do you mean? Why you?
No, as in why I actually went for Ryuki.
Probably because it's the one that everyone talks about.
Oh, so my bad. I'm thinking Hibiki. So my bad. I'm thinking Hibiki.
Oh, Hibiki. You know, that took me over 13 months, but we're not talking about Hibiki right now. You see, because me watching Fires, I mean, you know, Hibiki took long enough to watch. But then when I did, you know, after I did eventually finish watching it, I basically watched a batch. I can't remember which order, but it was in reverse order. You know, I watched, because what number Heisei is Hibiki? Right, it must be, hold on.
It's
I'm
6th.
thinking, so Fires was, so basically I had watched Fires straight after Hibiki.
Kuuga, Agito,
then
Ryuki,
I watched
Faiz,
Blade, then I watched Ryuki.
Blade. No, Faiz is the 4th.
It can't be, because it's Fires.
Kuuga, Agito, Ryuki, Faiz, Blade, Hibiki.
So you reckon, well, either way, I watched them in reverse order, and in general, I was just generally relieved to be watching a series like Fires, Blade, and Ryuki, you know, in whatever order I did watch them.
You think it's Blade then Faiz?
This is it. You can look it up while I talk about the Fires. Basically, you know, however long it, you know, like it took me a year to watch Hibiki, then I watched 3 Kamen Rider series consecutively. And I kind of knew what Fires looked like, you know, so I knew what the first suit looked like. I didn't know anything about it, but just by the look of Fires on his own, I was really happy, you know, just by the look. And it seemed a bit weird because his eyes looked a bit you know, like just the general round head with the sort of real sort of, the eyes that look like lungs, basically. He just looked like he had a round head, but his Tron-like, you know, the sort of neon lions on his suit kind of made him look a bit Tron-esque. So I was definitely intrigued, and I was just generally happy to be watching something other than Hibiki anyway. So yeah, I knew it was like it had a phone henshin, because you kind of see him walking around with a phone. You know, I didn't. So you know, apart from that, I didn't really know that much else. But while you're still looking up, I will start talking about watching the first few episodes. I do like how it kind of had that dark vibe to it. I really did like how, you know, so like it, you know, set up the story properly, unlike Hibiki, which took forever to set up. Fire's set up pretty much instantly. You know, before long, you've got the dude in the laundrette or laundromat, if you want to call it. It kind of set up the whole Orphanoch analogy and what they were about. You had, I kind of thought, the smart brain, but you kind of knew, just because if you're familiar with a series like Kabuto, you would know that, you kind of look at something like Smart Brain, it's like, oh yeah, they're definitely the secret evil organization acting good. Because I'm assuming you're right, but anyway, I kind of felt that, being Smart Brain, it wasn't quite original, but I was happy enough to go along with it and seeing what the Orphanochs were about. Again, I like the feel of how dark it was. So, how about you? Now that you know that you're right, what did you think of the first few episodes?
I'll be honest. I went in with almost next to no. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, really, and as I mentioned in my Toku talk, I will say that it is fairly involved. There's a lot.
Yeah, carry on.
There's a lot going on. I'm not going to deny that. As when you first start, you don't actually start with the main character. He comes in later on in an episode or such, but it starts off with others, and then it does. It's one of those series that you need a couple of episodes so you know who said characters are, whereabouts they are, and so on and so forth.
One thing I do remember, I think it was this series as well as like a series like Kabuto, is the actors look quite similar, like they all look alike. Anyway, so carrying on. So let's talk about the cast.
Right.
What do we think of our hero Faiz?
I think he is. I like the character for Faiz, the actual actor. I think he's cool. He plays a very. I don't give a shit about like working. I can do whatever I want, beat up whoever I want, kind of thing. Not quite like a bully. It's sort of like your freelancer hero. Do it like I can do it the way I want, kind of thing. But then over time,
kind of like half-assed.
Yes, but the thing is over time you see him progress into a more slightly mature, if you will,
more organized.
Agreed. Yeah, and you kind of see that at the same time while he practices or develops his role at the laundromat as well. So I find he is a good developing character as well.
I think I will actually agree. He did have a good set of character development. And then what about the other
Kaiser.
two riders?
Right.
I was going to say the other
Kaiser.
two riders.
I love Kaiser for his personality. I thought was fantastic. The opposite to Faiz in that it's a very bossy, very dominant.
I do remember him again. I'll be honest, my memory of him is quite vague, but I do remember him being quite sleek.
No, he wasn't. He was more like a sleek version of American football, if that would kind of sum it up.
Right.
Anyway, but he would always, how can I say, be not flashy, but really gun ho, if you will, in fights like he not storm into danger, but he would be very brute force. And then not only that, with his deceptive side of things as well, that added a lot of layers to him, which I love. Then you have Delta, which
had more than one person using, wasn't it?
But it did end up with one.
The one guy who was like completely nuts, wasn't he?
Well, at first.
He was really aggro and nuts, and then he died. Was he the one that died?
No.
Actually, they all kind of died.
Okay.
That was the one
okay.
that overpowered the user.
For the viewers at home, what Flayvaman is referring to, which we'll get into later on during the story parts, but to round off the actual character as Delta first, the person who actually ended up inheriting the belt of Delta, I felt he was a younger version of Faiz, if you will, like this undeveloped character that sooner or later he needed to find his feet, if that makes sense. And then you have the two sub-characters at the laundromat. You have the actual owner of the laundromat, Keitaro.
He was some random guy, wasn't he?
Well, I say random, but he was a very he was a main recurring character, so he was fairly main.
And then you had the main supporting female, who, because she went to school with a bunch of them, didn't she?
I'll get to that when it gets to the story part. But in regards to the actual characters themselves, you have him. He's this slightly klutzy.
I kind of felt that he was always the one being mule kicked because Faiz was obviously always running off to do his thing.
Okay, he's a very I don't want to. He's gullible, not naive, but like he is ambitious though. I like that, and you know that young student from Wizard.
Pui guy.
Yeah, him. Imagine him, but a bit more mature, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Older and mature. So right. I know that's like the opposite, but it's sort of that kind of thing.
Brilliant. Yeah.
It's like that. Because he has his own laundromat. He wants to. Basically, his dream is to
clean the world's laundry or something, wasn't it?
To bring the world happiness through the whiteness of laundry or something like that.
Yeah, I remember. How can you forget something like that? But I remember that.
Then you have the female, the of the good guy's side, who, before you say, I did not see as the fan service as much from her as I did from the Orphanox side of one.
Yeah, we'll talk about the three Orphanox in a bit. Okay, well, I don't know. I thought they were both pretty, to be fair, but okay.
I foresaw. Okay, so anyway, this character, she has a lot. She's
a very strong female support.
She is very. I don't want to say tomboyish, but she's very.
Oh no, I'll agree with you. She's probably fairly tomboyish.
But at the same time, she has got a lot of story in her as well.
Because her connections to there was like a school storyline, wasn't there? I remember that.
And the connection between her and Kaiser as well. I'll get to that when we get to the story. Because there was a love triangle,
wasn't it, if I remember correctly?
I'll get to that as well, if you remind me. Anyway, then you have the
three Orphanox
to start with, which you have Kiba
Yuji to start. It's two guys and a girl.
Right. In short, you have a centaur, if you will. You've got I don't know what the hell the other guy is.
I know one of the two guys, one of the Orphanox. He actually died in real life about a year or two ago. Yeah, I remember reading that in the like Toku News. Yeah.
Alright. Do you know which one?
It's the one who's always fighting fires, because you've got the one who's very quiet. Yeah, he's always fighting fires. He's the one that died. I can't remember. It was quite a while ago that it was reported of his death. And then you had the other guy who was like the rebellious one. He was like always like kicking up shit.
This is where it gets interesting. Those three main Orphanox, they have they try to keep a pact to themselves in that they do not want to and they shall not harm humans. In that they became almost not a group, but rebellious against other Orphanox. So, yeah, which I found rather interesting. And then you have this female Orphanox.
She was the one that was like having some sort of email phone romance with Fires, wasn't it, or one of the other guys? that was weird. I vaguely remember that, but I remember it being weird. I'm just like, this girl's just too kooky. I just don't see what the attraction was.
She is a bit of a slightly klutzy, well not klutz, but like very
She's
spaced.
really weird.
She's a bit spaced, if you will.
She's really weird. Yeah.
But then when she goes, ever since she gets a power, and then she gets all aggro.
It's
then
almost like she gets hormonal, if I'm honest.
And she gets completely on a different scale, and just it's absolutely insane the way that she ends people's lives in that show. And other than that,
No, then you had the other guy, the rebellious guy. The one thing I will say about this guy is I loved how he just sort of lashed out and was just completely insane. I just remember one time he went off the handle. Like you don't really hear that much English music. Well, you don't really hear any English music in Toku.
English.
But I remember this one. Episode. I mean, we'll get into the episodes later, but I got to mention this now before I forget it. There was this time he just went completely off the handle, and they started playing an American hip hop song called The Franklins, and he just went completely mad because it's the only time in Toku I've seen where you hear an English song with English lyrics from like America. And he just had, like, they probably didn't understand the words, but there was swearing in it. I'm just like, oh my god, because I know my hip hop, and I just heard this song. I just went completely, I went nuts. I was like, oh wow, this guy's really going mad for it. Yeah, I just had to mention that. Anyway, so what do we think of the Orthodox in general? Because I don't really remember them having like a.
Bearing in mind, just to finish off the characters though, there's still two more just to sum up as well. On the villain side of things though, you've also got the president.
Yeah, because I only remember the three.
One second. You got the president of Smart Brain. Then you have the girl, his secretary, who's this girl in a latex blue skirt, one-piece skirt.
She was in Ryuki as well, but yeah.
She is the fan service, I feel. She was so trying to be kawaii or like, yeah, kind of thing. And it was cringing but funny in that sort of a way, if that makes sense. Like, it's sometimes it's like, okay, I get it. And then you have the characters from Lucky Clover, who are pretty much the. I
remember the name.
Which are basically like, if you want to call it the commanders, the generals, whatever you want to call it.
The commanders. Yeah. I remember now. They were the guys that hung out in a bar, weren't it?
Yeah. Right. So
yes, I remember this.
There are two main Lucky Clovers to start with, who are the bartender and this nerdy guy. And this nerdy guy.
Yeah, I'm really remembering this now, but yeah, go on.
And the nerdy guy is pretty much the characteristics of. How can I word it? He basically feels like he has all the power. He needs all the power, but then if someone surpasses him, he just gets all.
Strategic.
No, quite the opposite. No. He gets all cowardly. If he fears something, not only would he be afraid, he would be a scared little brat and run. Literally, like almost like pissing your pants kind of scared. It is interesting. And then he would still quiver in fear for the next couple of days or in the next episode in the circumstance. So
I do remember the female from Lucky Clover being hot though.
And then the female, the bartender, she is like pretty much the complete and utter opposite. She's very methodical. She is very strategic. She's very in the shadows, but would pretty much. I don't want to say assassin-like, but if you get what I mean, she's very methodical. What she does. And then, yeah, so that's pretty much that for the characters. What were you mentioning?
There was no henchman, was there? Not that. Well, actually, you've seen this. You can't. What?
That's. Besides the occasional. Besides the monster of the week, if you will. At the last couple of episodes, Smart Brain develops an independent belt. No, not independent, sorry. I rephrase that.
I remember.
I rephrase that. not
It
independent, but
was. It was like
a
it had like
downgrade.
a chain motif. I remember
No,
this.
no,
No.
no. It basically was the equivalent to Kabuto's Riot Troopers.
No, no. I think you missed what I'm talking about. I remember they did develop another rider that was just all black with just chains.
No.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, screw it. Anyway, so what did you think of the overall look of the Orthodox?
I think each one had
Like they were all really grey. There was a lot of grey.
deliberate, but I
Yeah.
think all had characters. They all had, all but maybe a few, had some kind of an animal resemblance in the Orphanok, if you will. The Orphanoks would have some kind of an animal take upon it, and I like that. They all had individual personalities, which I liked. And I actually did not mind the whole mono grey. At least it kept it consistent.
Yeah.
And at least it kept it consistent, and then all you had to do was change the outfit, which they did, and they put so much change in each one that it had it had its own characteristics, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean, the only
it
one.
kind of reminded me, like, the motif they had in general, it just kind of reminded me of, like, a chess set. But that's just me, I think.
I wouldn't say chess set.
Like, especially, like, you had the Horse Orthodox, where, yeah, it just kind of reminded me of a rook.
No, when you say it like that, maybe. But the only difference is, the president of Smartbone, when he goes into his Orphanok mode, I foresaw Frieza from Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, okay. I'm not that familiar with Dragon Ball. I'm a little familiar with Dragon Ball. Kamehameha.
No, it's one
Anyway,
of those.
I
Okay.
would say, like, with Fires, there was, like, a really strong morale to the story, and about, oh, just because you're born a certain way, you know, you don't have to follow sort of the stereotype or the cliche, you know, your potential can exceed what you started with. I really like the morale of this.
Right. See, this is where what Flayvaman is referring to is, and just slightly tapping on with the story as well. There are two different types of Orphanoks: those that are actually made an Orphanok through another, or those that become an Orphanok by actually dying, and they revive themselves and come back themselves with the power of an Orphanok as well, within them as well, so almost like an awakening. And then those three main Orphanok characters we mentioned, they have a choice. They have made a choice to actually not harm any humans. So it's not your stereotypical, what do you call it? Like, good guy versus bad guy. No, it is almost. It is very. How can I say? Freestyle, if you will. Like, I don't want to say do whatever you like, but it's so involved. Again, and yes, I like that differentiation they throw in. I mean, even with, it's like you got Team Riders, Team Smart Brain, and then these three Orphanoks in the middle, almost caught up in the whole mix of things, if you will. Like, the Team Riders would just go after them because they're Orphanoks, and then Smart Brain would go after them because they've betrayed them. So it's very unique.
I found the story quite complex. I liked how it evolved over the 50 or so episodes.
Right, see, this is where, if we're going straight into the story, this is where it gets so involved, but I'm going to try and crush it down as much as possible. That said, so, starting off with the three main Orphanoks, as I mentioned, they get reborn into Orphanoks by themselves, as opposed to from another Orphanoch, calling themselves the Originals. And then, aside from that, you gradually find out that the Faiz belt as well. Not only do the main characters use the Faiz belt, but other characters can actually harness the power of Faiz belts, but only those that actually have the power of the Orphanoch within them. Which was a tad spoiler for me through Decade, but anyway. But aside from that, it is a very complex story, because you have that about the Orphanochs and the original, plus the usage of the Faiz belts and the other rider belts on one hand. On the other hand, you have the whole story with the this school that Mari and Kaiser has actually grown up together in.
Yeah, I remember this.
And then there was this incident, or whether this is during the second half, or when Kaiser comes in and then slightly develops his character, and then you find out that there's this incident in this school.
You see, I liked how, just to interject a second, but I did like how, you had the first half of Fires, which hinted a lot as to what, like there was a lot of mystery going on. I do remember, like, everything was revealed in the second half. It's kind of like how Gaim should have been, but they cheated, whereas Fires did it correctly, in my opinion.
I mean, what's more, so what happened to everyone when they grew up, and then you slowly see that there's that almost like...
It was a good unraveling of a story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say what happens, but there is that story. So it's like almost two different stories going on, if you will. And then what's more, each character trying to pick a side, if you will. It's almost like civil war, if you will. It's like Orphanoch and Riders within...
It did get... I will be honest, I mean, because on one hand you do have some really linear series, just in general. And then you've got, I guess you've got the Fires under the scale, where there's just so much going on. Because I remember, like, the Ryuki Fires Blade, they had lots of stuff going on. It wasn't a linear story, especially Fires. I do remember this much.
I mean, hence why I keep saying it is so involved, and I will say it felt at times like Civil War, as in Captain America Civil War from the comics, in short, whose side are you on? As in, are you on the good?
Trust you to drop another Marvel comparison, but alright, I'll let you have that one.
No, but either on the Orphanoch side, or you're with the Riders.
Yeah.
You know? And even if you're an Orphanoch...
Even the Riders were nuts. I mean,
See,
what happened with Fires was immense. I remember that one.
Near to the end, it got ridiculous as well. I'm not going to deny that.
It was insane. I mean,
and this is where I say, who's siding on, the Riders or the Orphanochs, and then sometimes you'd have the Riders losing their belts, and then one of the Lucky Clovers would take the belt, and one of the Lucky Clovers would take the belt and actually henshin into it. So basically, this belt has been...
It's
used.
Like the opposite.
I'm not saying passed on.
It is the opposite of Gaim in almost every way. Because like Gaim, you use the belt once, it's attached to you, no one else can use it. Gaim, it hinted at stuff that would happen in the second half, and then they just cheated it. Whereas Fires, it hinted at stuff, and then I was satisfied in the revelations that unravelled. Yeah, there was a lot going on. It was a very involved series, as you say.
I mean, not just that, but also, once you think about it as well, I mean, besides the belt, being not passed on, but used a lot. I'm not kidding. That
you have to keep up.
You have to keep up. I mean, if you really want to count how many people uses the Faiz belt, the Kaiser belt, the Delta belt, honestly, it goes on.
I don't think the Kaiser belt was used that much by other people, was it? It was just...
A couple times. It was used a couple of times by others, but anyway. But Delta was
mainly... I know everyone was fighting for Fires, and then...
At the beginning,
it was about Delta being the most powerful belt or something.
Because you have the whole... And then... Because... Oh, this is gonna get absolute. And then you get the last story within the story talking about the king as well, the king of Orphanox. And then that's where things got absolutely, wait, where did this come from kind of thing. I mean, you're playing Civil War, and then all of a sudden you get this last one. And what I will say is, as a story, it actually rounded it off. It did make sense. However, I did not really like the way that they finished the fight, if that makes sense.
You mean the ending?
The last fight I felt was too short.
We'll talk about the last episodes at the end. But alright, let's move on to the aesthetics of the series.
Explain.
What did you make of the character attire? Like, I liked how if I remember correctly, Faiz was more decked out in sort of leather gear, like biker gear. No? I remember him wearing black, no? Are you sure? Oh well.
That would be Kaiser. And it wasn't really, he wasn't decked out in all black as well. It was more...
No, like leathers, like...
No, they weren't. That's the thing. They weren't. No.
So I remember Faiz was... Because Faiz was the one that had like a cheap bike with it.
Right. First things first. They all wore civvies, pretty much. They all wore like t-shirts with a sometimes they'll wear like a bomber jacket, sometimes they'll wear like a rain jacket or whatever, but not really leather, which I found interesting as well. I don't know which series you're thinking of. And it seems. And then you've got all of their civvies did change. At least the riders, they changed their civvies. The Orphanox, however, were almost
well dressed.
No, not just that. The same. It's not only well dressed, but it was always the same. Now I don't know if this was budget or whatever, but the nerdy
Did you say
smart
it worked?
Both. In the smart guy at the Lucky Clover, he'd always wear the same leather red maroon jacket and almost like schoolboy style trousers. The president of Smart Brain, he'd wear suit always, almost the same black suit with white shirt and such. But the reason I'm not going against it, even though it is very monotonous on their end, the reason I'm not questioning it is because it worked for them, for those characters. It worked for their role. It worked. And then for the three original Orphanox, they would from time to time change their civvies as well. So I like that. At least there were other characters that changed their outfits, their attire, whatever, to do whatever they want. So it was unique. Like, it wasn't your stereotypical uniform at Smartbrain, besides the secretary who'd always wear that latex skirt. But there wasn't really a uniform as such. I mean, apart from the laundromat guy, he'd wear blue apron, and everyone else would wear a blue apron. I think that was as close to uniform as there was, really. But that's pretty much...
So what did we think of the actual suits? The henshin suit, battle armor.
Right.
See, I really digged the sort of Tron neon lines that went with fires. You know, it was quite unique to me watching that. And then, like, you know, because when I saw, I think it must have been Kaiser, the second rider, I was too busy thinking it looked a bit similar to Zabi from Kabuto. But then Delta, he was the purple one, wasn't he?
I can see the B reference. Or
yeah,
even
and, like,
the Wasp.
Delta, yeah. But like Delta, I just kind of, for some reason, I really liked how purple he looked.
He wasn't purple. That's Saiga. Black and white. Or white on black.
Oh well.
Because Saiga's the white with purple and white, remember? With the jetpack.
So who was Saiga then? Wasn't he the third rider? So how many riders were there?
Only the 3.
So who's Saiga then?
We don't know. I didn't see Saiga. That's my point. Nor did I see Orja.
Right. Okay.
If you know who I mean.
Wait a minute, because I do remember watching the film. Oh, never mind. I'm getting well confused.
Okay. In short, right. You've got Faiz, who's red neons on black. You
and then the suit, and then the power up was reversed.
Right, effectively, yes. And then you got Kaiser, who's yellow neon on black, and then you have Delta with white neon on black.
Okay.
For me, I felt starting with Faiz. It took me a bit to like the actual outfit. I felt it was a very something on steroids. I just felt like a small head with the butched up armor. It felt like something on Toked Up on Protein Shake or whatever.
I thought he had a massive head. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just for some reason I felt like it was small. But anyway, maybe I'm wrong. But
Yeah. Carry on.
Anyway, then you have see, I thought Faiz was okay, but Kaiser though, I loved Kaiser more. I loved the almost not quite hinted breastplate sort of thing, like almost a Dragon Ranger. Not hints kind of thing, but because there was like a sly-ish Easter egg.
I vaguely remember what the helmet looked like, let alone the rest of it. I mean, I remember Fire's head to toe, and Super Fire's, or whatever the power-up was called.
I'll get to that. See, with Kaiser, I preferred Kaiser because it actually had more. It gave off more characteristic to it. Then Delta comes in, and I don't know. I didn't know what to think. I felt it was a bit monotonous, color-wise. Just it looked like a walking zebra, to be honest. But it just I don't know. Honestly, when Delta came in, I just felt it was a little meh.
So did the guys actually have? Because I knew they had like their regular motorbikes, but I don't think when they were henshin they had like different motorbikes. It was still the same motorbike.
This is where I'm gonna finish off the power-ups and arsenals, and then I'll get to bikes.
Oh well, no, bikes is the next bit.
All right. With the bikes, in the first couple of episodes, or lies, second or third or whatever, couple of episodes in, Faiz sees a bike that he likes, which Mari, the main actress, uses. And then he basically, not only does the actor claim the belt for himself while saving the main actress, but also claims the bike as well for himself, which is the Faiz bike.
It's more of a scooter, wasn't it?
It was a sports bike. Or more like a dirt bike, actually, if you will. And then you've got, Kaiser's bike is a, how do you call it, a pod bike? Like, with a pod on the side. I don't know what you call them. Almost like a Adam West style 1966 Batman bike.
Oh, you mean like a sidecar? Did it have a sidecar?
Yeah, it had a sidecar.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it had a sidecar.
But what my question was, when they henshined, it was still the same bike. They didn't have a bike for their henshined up.
No. They still use the same bike in civvies as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Now, the only person that didn't have a rider bike is Delta.
Okay.
But what was interesting as well, and what really made this series unique as well, is both Faiz and Kaiser's bike transformed into something. And by that I mean Faiz's bike would transform into a
yes, I remember this.
A robot.
The robot.
Yeah, the robot.
I do remember this now.
It almost looked like a silver RoboCop with a wheel and a Gatling gun on it, kind of thing. And I'm like,
I remember this.
That's okay. And then this is where it got a little odd and unique at the same time. That Kaiser's bike transforms into a frog, if you will. Like, it almost like an AT-AT from... No, it lies. AT-ST from Star Wars, one of the Scout Walkers. And it... Or Chicken Walker, whatever you want to call it. And it was absolutely balmy, but it works just for the uniqueness and differentiation as well. I liked it. Otherwise, Delta merely used just a generic bike.
So, okay, moving on. Because I remember Faiz had like a gun, like out of his phone, like out of the standby phone, he had a gun. But I don't remember.
Okay. Weapon-wise, Faiz and Kaiser, both their phones, even though one flips up and the other one flips around,
yeah, I remember.
They were both able to turn them into phone gun things. However, Delta's henshin device was actually an audio gun. Like, you speak into it and it does whatever, like shoot or check. Yeah, anyway, so that's... But it's actually a gun, if you will. Faiz
Do they have any other weapons, though?
Yes.
Right, so I know Faiz would always walk... The thing is, it wasn't very efficient, because he'd always having to walk around with a suit with like a little briefcase with all his different gadgets.
This is where it got interesting. Faiz gets his beam sword from his bike's steering handle.
I remember that.
It was interesting. And what's more, he'd have both him and Kaiser, they had pretty much had a similar arsenal. They'd have a knuckle duster, and they had I don't know what you want to call it, an engine, I don't know, a thruster or whatever you want to call it, that they'd attach onto their leg for imprisoning them with a burst of energy before finishing with a rider kick or whatever. Now, Kaiser's different weapon to Faiz's is instead of having a sword, he'd have a sword gun, in that it's literally a gun, but also when he puts the rider chip, if you will, or it extend a blade out, so he'd reverse hold said sword, which I thought was rather cool. Delta unfortunately only had a small gun, which was unfortunate, really. I was expecting a little bit more from it. What I do love, however, is the belts themselves, and this is one thing I was thinking about, and I'm just quickly going to tap on the reason why I mentioned about the belts, why I love it. They merely wore it. This thing was like, you can feel the weight when they click and they wear it. It's not like you're like, okay, you just have to buckle, you put it on, and then...
I kind of felt that was really inefficient, though.
No. But this is where I'm going to flip round and saying, like, look at the current Neo Heisei or whatever, in that you have the buckle, you put it on, and then the belt just materializes, whereas in this case...
He has to physically carry it around. Yes. It was just too bulky.
No, but I love that, in that...
I mean, I like...
You had to protect...
If we're talking about henshin device now, I like the phone... the phone motif didn't bother me. It's the fact that, obviously they... because this is it. Because obviously Faiz was a couple years before it. That belt, materialized. It was fine. It was efficient. I meant Ryuki. But for Faiz, it's like... he's got to carry around that little briefcase with him everywhere. It's just...
No, but I actually like it in that the actual armor that protects him, he needs to protect him. Do you see what I mean?
That sounds nice when you put it like that, but yeah. Alright, so what key... Well, I mean, you've literally just finished watching the series. What episodes stood out for you?
Just finishing off the suits as well, when you say key episodes as well. When Kaiser hands Faiz the if almost like a clock up device in the T.
The power up. You're
No, no,
talking
no,
about the power.
not blaster, but the first unofficial power up in that he basically accelerates himself for 10 seconds. It slows time down and okay, basically what this
Yeah,
does.
I don't quite remember that from Fighters. I remember that from Kabuto.
No, no,
But
okay. What this thing is he it how can I describe it?
I've seen too many fighters.
Yes,
Kabuto.
yes, you have.
Yeah.
Faiz basically gets a jolt of energy in which he goes so fast, time almost stops itself, if you will. Almost like what Kabuto does with Clock Up, except for Faiz's case, this is merely for just 10 seconds though.
Okay.
And then after that you get his power up, proper power up if you will, super form, which is called Blaster. And which again, coincidentally, it looks like a folded up case, which it unfolds into a gun, which also has a blade within it as well. And that's also another memorable episode. And one thing I will say is I love how, spoiler alert, how they do not milk the blaster form. What I mean by that is they don't use it every single week, just because
Actually, that is true.
they do not milk it. I love that. They use it only when they need to, which I love.
Right, so I'm going to talk about a few episodes of the film as well. You see, because I remember like the sort of the landmarks, like when Kaiser was introduced, when Delta was introduced, when the psycho dude who was Delta, I can't, he appears in the Kamen Rider Sango film. Like he's completely nuts. Like I remember seeing those episodes, but then there were a few mundane points I remember, like just mucking the laundromat guy around. The sort of uncanny romance with Fires and the Orphanoc girl. But I've already mentioned this. The one episode that really stood out for me was when I know the rebellious Orphanoc was like, "Oh, I'm sick of being the good Orphanoc when the other Orphanocs are giving me crap." So he just randomly walks out the apartment.
Yeah.
He's got like the Crooklyn Clans, the Franklins. This is the song, by the way. You should look up. It appears in Kamen Rider Faiz. He's just got this playing for like most of the episode. I'm like, oh my god, this guy's listening to American hip hop. How awesome is this? And then I'll be honest, I don't really remember that much about the ending, like the final episodes, which you can cover in a moment. But just to cover the film, I watched the film about 3-4 years ago. I'm not going to lie, I fell asleep during watching it. I remember it had a really
is
good
it Paradise
intro.
Lost, right?
Yeah, I think. I never remember the titles of the films, I just remember the stuff that happens. Like, the intro, you see them like, like there's some museum thing going on, and then some random ancient Orphanoc breaks out. And, it's like, oh no! And then...
Isn't that when we get Orja? When
that's where I'm getting this memory from now.
Because Orja is almost it's black with gold neon on black with a crest, almost like a pharaoh crest.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So like again, this has all come from some random museum artifact. And then they just base the whole episode around that, and then there's like some sort of contest that goes on. I'll be honest, it started really well, but then it got boring, and I did fall asleep. And then when I woke up, like Mary and Fires just kind of copped off at the end. It's like, all right, brilliant. That's the film in a nutshell.
All right, then why are we going insane? Like, where's Saiga?
I don't know. I remember some massive robot thing appeared in a basketball court.
That's helpful.
Wow,
that's so helpful. Anywho,
So let's talk about
Just
sort of
things.
the external aesthetics
Just
of.
one thing I will mention in regards to things I remember. There is so much, not just love triangle, but love within
Oh yeah, I
other.
did mention the love triangle earlier. Yeah.
It's so involved. Again, it is so like this person loves this person who loves this person, and so on and so forth. And it's just so
Weird.
not just weird, but so you
No,
have to.
because again, because you had Fires and the Orphanaut girl sort of messaging each other, but they didn't know it was each other they were messaging. It's so cliche, but you could just sit back and laugh at it.
You can actually. Anywho.
So, I don't know about any other key apps, but moving on to sort of the external attributes. What did you make of the music for Fires?
The actual opening I loved. I always listened to it as a, as I always say, a build up to the actual episode, and it does. It makes it. And then right at the end, to
Open your eyes for the next Fires.
I have to admit, you should have done that. Because that sounded almost on cue accurate. That actually.
But that's it. I couldn't have started the episode with that because that's what they say at the end. Yeah. Anyway.
Touche. But
I'm
still.
not gonna lie. I've had about 3 or 4 years practicing saying that just for absolutely no reason. So.
Oh, now you have a reason though.
Oh no, I've wasted it now. So carry on. So no, I like the OP as well.
I love the OP. I
It's
think.
very sort of. It's very giddy. It was a very giddy OP.
How do you mean giddy?
Like da 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 da. Can you feel? Da, 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 da. It's just really giddy. It's giddy.
I still don't understand giddy. As in
Never mind.
As in happy.
Like
You mean happy
no,
feel?
like you know, sort of. It's not like a smooth song. It's like giddy. Just a lot of movement. It's very energetic.
Right. Yeah, I guess. And then you have what else? The actual BGMs as well. I thought
I don't remember anything about the BGM.
that's the thing, because I just watched it. I still have some, and the most prominent one I will remember is when there's something silly going on. They would always have the same background music for a silly moment.
I think that's normally what Sentai does, like a very comical, sort of clumsy song in the background.
And I think it worked. It really worked.
What about choreography? I mean, unless you got any more to say about music, I don't remember anything about choreography. Like it was more about tech, really.
See,
in my
choreography's weird in that it was very.
Again, I just remember it being so tech heavy.
No, see.
It was like you had Fires with his roundhouse kick, if I remember correctly.
What? No,
Yeah,
that's
like-
Kabuto.
No, oh fudge. Never mind. I remember he did some-
Kabuto does the roundhouse when he does 3, 2, 1, rider kick, and he does the roundhouse. Anyway.
Oh, all right. So. What
Anyway,
was
look, what I was gonna say with the choreography, it's very.
I just
Depending
remember
on
it being tech heavy.
no,
but go on.
no. It depends on who's wearing the belt. They would fight whoever's wearing the belt, and whichever orphanok. I feel that the characters for who they are have the experience for who they are. If that makes sense.
Yeah, carry on.
They, like for instance, if you just wore the belt, you only have X amount of experience. If you have worn it forever, or if you're strong already in martial arts and then you wear the belt, you have set amount. It's very not Street Fighter, but very dirty fighting, if you will, if that's the correct term to use. If that makes sense, like it's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, from my memory, I do remember.
I mean, okay. What I mean
No,
by
like, you know, I would remember, like, yeah, and I guess this is going into locations as well. Like, I'd remember them fighting at the seaside. I'd remember them fighting in a car park.
like, Okay,
So
I'll give you an
yeah, it
example.
had
Like
it had that dirty fighting feel.
right,
Absolutely.
you know how you have Ryuki, which is dirty fighting on cranked up to 20 or whatever, with all their cards, powers, and whatever, right?
Right.
Imagine that toned down without the cards, if that makes sense. So it's still dirty fighting. They
Yeah.
would have a bit of tech within them, with all the slight power ups, with the slight gadgets and whatever. But it's literally dirty
Now I
fighting.
guess story
Hang on
wise,
one second.
well,
Minus, and I will stress this. I thankfully saw a lack of fireworks.
yeah, I mean, again, these early Heisei riders didn't really use that much firework. But I think the one thing we've both forgotten to cover in terms of story. I mean, I mentioned how the Orphanot girl and the buyers had like that romance over email without knowing who they were. But at the same time, it wasn't just them as well. It was you
Technically,
had
it's
the
not
main
Faiz.
Orphanot,
It's not Faiz.
huh?
It's not
Oh,
Faiz.
it was the laundromat guy, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I knew that.
sure.
But then Fires had that rivalry with the horse Orphanok, and they didn't know who they were
No,
either. They just because they'd see each other normally in
no.
like human form,
What's interesting?
and then when you had Fires, you had him as a horse, so they knew each other in
Mhm.
two separate ways. It's insane.
You pretty much had a story within a story for that alone, and then another
Again,
one.
there was so much going on.
It is. I mean, this series, I will. It is so involved. There is so much context within it. It's like a story within a story within a story, and a story on its own on the
It's that
side, and like even like maybe one member of a Lucky Clover, he had a couple of episodes for himself, but his story itself was enough to tell you that he's there to be remembered, and it is so engrossing. The whole series is so
So, what
engrossing.
did you think of the locations of Fires? I mean, again, I remember, now that you mentioned, because I completely forgot that there was the Lucky Clover and they were in a bar. I remember that bar looking so sort of like dark and sort of neon-esque. And then you had the laundromat, which was so light and just sort of casual and easygoing.
Right.
And then, like, where they did the fight scenes, they were quite random, to be honest. It was all, like, very sort of sky heavy, like seasides and sort of edges of cliffs. Yeah, like I
No.
remember like a few car park scenes where you just see like the valley behind them and stuff.
See, this is where I'm gonna counterpoint. First off, I love the laundromat. I love the fact that that is unique. That we have not had anything like that in a while. I love the whole. Um, I love the Bar Clover, Lucky Clover set. Hideout, if you will. In that, and not only that, not only is it that dark eerie feel, it feels properly like an underground bar, because when you actually go into this Bar Clover, you actually see people going down the stairs, going into the bar
Like a
as well.
seedy bar.
What?
Yeah, I like a seedy little bar. Yeah,
No, 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 more like just an underground bar, like as in it's actually below ground, so you can
I
actually tell, and it adds that dimension to it. I didn't really give two rats ass for Smart Brain, because it was just another building with an office
yeah
in it.
yeah I remember.
I was hoping just a little bit more, but no. Well, we do see some of the school classroom where Mary and Kaiser
Wasn't
grew up.
that school like buried underground or something after some mad accident? Right. Yeah, I remember that.
I'm not going to give too much away on that, because it's part of the story within the story, whatever, blah. Location in regards to fighting, I actually found some of them interesting in that they would literally fight on a road at times. Like, literally, they would just fight in the middle of whatever, a road. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Anyway. Otherwise, they'd fight under a bridge, by a river, whatever. It is sometimes random. You'd have your stereotypical ones on a beach, you'd have ones by a stadium, whatever. Your usual ones, but there was a bit more random on this one, which I was grateful for. Other than that, I think that's me for location.
Yeah, so what did you make of the final arc, final story arc, and summarizing Fires?
The final fight I couldn't give to. Well, I wish it was just a tad longer. I felt it was a bit short. I'm not going to say otherwise. But the story as a whole, it did round off nicely. It rounded off. A bit sudden, but it.
I remember a lot of rain. Anyway,
Yeah, but regardless,
Raining.
it.
that just shows how good
Good
my
job.
memory is.
But it did round off in some way. I would have liked it if they rounded it more smoothly.
Yeah, that's the point. I remember it ending. I don't remember that much about
That's the thing. It's like, okay, end. That's what I mean.
So, would you recommend Fires to a friend?
You first.
No.
What?
Like, I'd recommend it. I'd recommend it to someone who's like a little familiar with riders. At some point, I'll be like, "Oh, watch Fires." All right, then. You know. But I wouldn't like. It wouldn't be a good starter. I don't think.
No, because
You know, I'll be honest. This might sound a bit snobbish, but I also feel it's a bit dated.
explain.
Like, because I'm watching, you know, like you watch Ryuki. Ryuki's the one, you know, it's well before it, and it's not as dated. It doesn't feel dated. Whereas, like,
I
you
see
know,
what you-
the style of phone, the fact that he's walking around with a clunky belt, you know, are you sure Fires rode a sports bike? It seemed more like a moped to me. Anyway.
If anything, Delta rode a moped.
Well, anyway, but that's the point. It kind of felt dated, you know. Whereas Ryuki didn't, and even Blade didn't, and anything Kabuto onwards doesn't feel dated. Whereas Fires felt, you know, it's still a good series. It had a lot of good themes. I like the story, but like, you know, sort of, you know, you see the orphanot girl overusing her phone. It just shows you the sort of phone she's using. That way, you can associate that with how far backdated it is.
See, this is what I'm gonna say with those comments that you've made in mind. If you ignore all the battles, which honestly, this was so story heavy, if you are just after a story alone, I can safely say then this would be fair for a first time if they're just after for a good story. Saying that, if you want all the context of the fire spells and all the fights and whatever,
The aesthetics, yeah,
exactly, then this would be more for a second, third timer. But it's honestly a tale of two. If you want this for story alone, just going in for the story, fine. But be warned, this is so... There's so much going on. It's so engrossing that there's a lot going on. Yeah. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention is did I mention about the Riot Trooper riders that were in this series as well? It's minor.
You
but
did mention it.
I
And
mean,
I also mentioned the fact that Fires does have its official ending to the storyline in Kamen Rider Sango GP. So, you know, whatever you remember of the ending, it's like, to get the real ending, you do have to watch Kamen Rider GP. It's insane. And Yongo.
anyway.
So, you know, that was funny. It was kind of nostalgic. I mean, because he also appears in the one before Sango. I think it was Heisei versus Showa or something that Fires also appears in. I think it was to mark the 10th anniversary of Fires or something. Anyway, but yeah, he appears in that as well. You know, like with Kamen Rider 15 bouncing around as well. LOL. Anyway, so I think that's us wrapping up Kamen Rider Faiz.
That's that then. As always, do like, comment, subscribe, something along the bottom as usual.
Like, follow, comment, subscribe, and like.
That's what I just said. I just
Yeah.
said that.
I was trying to make it sound a bit more uniform. Anyway.
Thanks, but no. Well, like, comment, subscribe. I thought you were actually going to add. You know, do follow us on
And put down.
the Book of Your Face YouTube or YouTube or however many sites we're on as well.
We are on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Lol.
Anywho. But as always, I've been Master Rider Bushido. He's been my Toku Bro from the other side of Earth, that being Flayvaman! And as always, do catch us next time. And as always, it's Physicam!
To the cam. See you next time.